Hi everyone, thanks for coming. I'm Owen Quake. I'm the head of Health, Safety, Environment and Carbon with BP in our hydrogen carbon capture business globally. BP has big ambitions for hydrogen. We see hydrogen as being vital to the energy transition. We're working towards, we aim to produce 500 to 700,000 tonnes of low carbon hydrogen by 2030. And to that end, safety is going to be really critical, and particularly safety leadership. So my background, I'm a process safety engineer, so predominantly presenting on process safety, but I think that the leadership challenge we have in a growth industry is going to be really challenging for us all to work on. So what do I mean by process safety risk? This is the hydrogen value chain. We've been working towards within BP to understand the risks across the value chain. So earlier last year, we started a process to really understand this from an inherent safety point of view. So there are three key areas of risk we've been looking at. One is hydrogen fire and explosion. So it comes up a lot in these presentations. Everybody understands hydrogen in a forum like this. I'll talk a bit more about hydrogen explosion a bit later on and the challenges that's going to present. Also looking at hydrogen derivatives, and particularly ammonia. Ammonia will be one of the early hydrogen derivatives being used for particularly exporting ammonia at scale. It's a toxic gas. It's a well understood toxic gas, but we will be using it in ways that we haven't used before and at scales that we haven't used it before. And finally, and this is one that's often underestimated, is carbon dioxide. So carbon dioxide will be used in blue hydrogen, obviously, potentially in some of the hydrogen derivatives like e-methanol, aviation fuels, e-methane even. And as part of handling carbon dioxide, we're going to be moving it around at scale. Dense phase carbon dioxide will present some significant challenges from a safety point of view. It's heavier than air, it's odourless, colourless. It will present a toxic risk and potentially an asphyxiation risk. So understanding these hazards really deeply and managing them through what's going to be a really rapidly growing industry is going to be critical. There are other risk areas, not covering those today, but that we're looking at, including oxygen and some of the electrical hazards. So moving on to the safety leadership challenge. We've got two, competing cultures in a lot of ways. And so when I say safety leadership, I'm predominantly talking culture, the culture we have for managing these risks. So conferences like this, it's a sense of optimism. We're all excited about the energy future. It's the reason I wanted to be in this industry. There's a bias towards optimism. So we want things to work out. We want our industry to grow, all for the right reasons. We need optimism at this stage in a growing entrepreneurial industry. And there's a lot of parallels made often between hydrogen and the digital boom. A couple of decades ago. I think those parallels are fair. There's a lot to learn from that. One of the challenges with optimism when applied too strongly is it leads us to disregard or understate risks. And so that's one of the challenges as an operator, particularly of these types of hazards, we're going to have to be careful of. On the flip side, and this comes up quite strongly much more, roles like mine are accountable for making sure that we understand the hazards and the risks and everybody's aware of it. We can't rule out things as non-credible. So that can lead us down the path of overstating the negative of some of these outcomes. Applied too strongly, this can lead to us stifling growth. So especially early in an industry, early in a project, if the safety hazards are too strongly stated, they can, and especially when the commercials are uncertain, finding the right balance there is important. So really that's the safety leadership challenge we have as an industry, we have at BP, is how do we grow an industry and how do we do it safely and sustainably at the same time? One of the answers you often get to this is either hydrogen, carbon dioxide, ammonia. We've used them all before, we understand them, we've got lots of history. That's true, but it's not true for some of the applications we're taking it into. So we can't just rely on historical performance. At the same time, we've got really good work done on industry standards in the ISO committees and NFPA, those types of organisations. But those standards are also, at least in some cases, fairly new. So relying on them too heavily, basically those standards will not be enough to make sure that we manage safely through. So what does this look like in action? So hydrogen, we all know its basic properties. It's very low ignition energy, high flammability range, high flame speed. If it comes out, it's more than likely going to ignite. It's lighter than air. It's likely to rise very quickly. But hydrogen explosion is something that is credible, and in some areas there's a view that we shouldn't consider it in design. So hydrogen, and by hydrogen explosion I mean either high energy deflagrations, which are, I guess, lower than the speed of sound wavefront, but still really high energy. But also that transition to detonation, which is the most significant event of explosions. And if it happens, it's very high energy. It is genuinely like an explosive. So on the positive side, people will talk about the fact that hydrogen is lighter than air. We've got very good ventilation. Therefore, explosion is incredible. We shouldn't consider it. On the negative side, you can get those who understand what can go wrong overstating it and saying that everything that's released will immediately detonate, and therefore we've got hundreds of metres of separation distance required between any hydrogen facility. So finding the right balance there is really critical. It's going to be the challenge for the industry, and we need to get it right before something really goes wrong. Ammonia is similar. Ammonia is a toxic gas. It's got a high odour level. You'll be able to smell it well before it's fatal. But having said that, it's also going to be handled at a scale that we're not used to handling it. So on the positive side, we've handled it for decades. There are people in industry who understand how to handle ammonia safely and well. We've got good standards around it. We will sense it well before it becomes fatal. On the other side, we need to be looking at it again because ammonia is going to be handled at scales that we're not used to. So two big challenges, two things we need to find a balance for. I guess, what is BP doing about this? At BP, we're basically, a lot of these here are 101 process safety management. So I'm not trying to say there's anything brand new here. I think the challenge is how do you apply them in an industry which is embryonic, which is nascent, an industry that's growing, where there's a lot of pace, there's a lot of change, and there's a lot of that optimism. So firstly, understanding really what can go wrong, and then making sure that everybody knows that is really important. So for us, this is about drawing on the research that's already been done by organisations like the European Union and the US Department of Energy. There's a whole lot of really good foundational research done, but also funding research into those applications where we think we need to understand it a bit better in order to really manage risk sharply. And then having briefings right to the top of the organisation. I've focused here specifically on executive level briefings because leadership obviously starts at the top, culture starts at the top. So making sure that everybody in the organisation understands what can go wrong and understands what can go wrong in a balanced way. So it's not about the sky is falling, but it's about making sure that we understand what can go wrong and what we're going to do to properly manage that risk. Consider inherent safety, and this is often a challenging topic to handle. I won't go into it in depth, but there are a series of principles that are applied around, I guess, removing hazards, minimising hazards before you get too far into a process, into a project, into a business opportunity. And I've deliberately often called it inherently safer design, but this is more than just about engineering. This is about business choices as well. So applying those standard principles in our projects, really early in our projects, in our technology selections, and also making sure that we've having the right process in place to demonstrate that that's actually happening. This is an area that we're really focused on right now, is deeply understanding barriers. So those of you familiar with safety, bow tie diagrams are the way of characterising barriers, the things that are in place to stop a risk from materialising into the worst consequence. We're doing that generically at the start, sort of almost pre-project to give us the framework to then go in and look at our projects early and look at our technology selection early. So we've got a barrier framework that allows us to and really embedding that culture of, in the end, it's the things that you have in place to manage risks that will really stop this from happening, and we need to understand that early and well. And along the lines of understanding it well, we're looking, and this is an area we're really just starting now, looking at prioritising performance standards. And I'm not saying ignoring industry standards, but making sure that with each of the barriers that we've identified, that we're clear on what performance looks like. So if that's a gas detector, that's a gas detection system, knowing what type of cloud you're trying to detect, knowing how long it's going to take to detect, what the action is going to be at the end, and being really clear on that up front, because that sort of thing can either add a lot of cost into a project or you can underdo it. So doing that work now and then using that as the basis for... The other advantage of looking at through the lens of performance rather than standards compliance or standard designs is it allows us to flex. As industry changes, as new technologies come in, if we know the sorts of performance we want out of the barriers that we have to manage risk, then we can flex with the industry as well. So, and finally, and I guess the main reason for presenting at a conference like this is a learning mindset and engaging externally. So big organisations like BP, there's a lot of internal knowledge, there's a lot of chance to just spend your time talking internally. For this industry, for all of us, it's really important that we're out there sharing externally. So we're active in industry forums. The one I've mentioned here, the Centre for Hydrogen Safety's got a booth over the back. I was the chair until the end of last year. Organisations like that with a practical, applied, knowledge-sharing focus are really important, and there are a lot of them around the industry. We need to be out there and active in those. We're open in the right way, keeping anti-competitive law in mind. We're open to benchmarking with peers. We do that now, and we're looking to do more of that. So again, those risk decision-making processes, how do you bring risk in and find the right balance? Benchmarking is going to be important in that as well. And then finally, we're open to ideas on new technologies for managing risk. One of the areas that I'm thinking about now is artificial intelligence. We're looking at, I guess, predictive safety is an area where we probably haven't done a lot of that in the traditional oil and gas, or at least not in my area, which is predominantly downstream oil and gas. But I think with going into an industry where we haven't got that history, anything we can do around predicting safety will be really critical. So I'm going to wrap it up there. I guess that last point, please feel free to come up, talk to me after this. We have a booth, a stand over, stand A28, which is over near the entrance. Please come and talk to us, interested in, and I guess anything around that, new technologies, benchmarking and sharing. Great.